There's a correlation and causation between certain groups in society that is I've never heard discussed. And I'll give an example here. The racial group that does the least well in society is blacks. Let's take the US as an example. Blacks, if you're black, you're less likely to go to university. You're far more likely to be a criminal. You're far more likely to be in jail. You're far more likely to come from a single parent household, something that causes a lot of bad following effects. You're likely to have a lower IQ on average. You're likely to drop out of school early. You're more likely to have substance abuse problems. So we have that bag of, I think we can agree those are bad things. There's a correlation between blacks and bad things. What causes black people to disproportionately have these characteristics? One explanation for this is society is so racist, it discriminates against black people so much that they underachieve in these big ways. That's one hypothesis. I think this is implied by many, especially on the left, but there's very little evidence for this. Let's separate race out from this, and let's look at let's divide people differently. Let's divide kids into kids who come from a single parent family and kids who have two parents at home, regardless of race. What we see is a very similar picture. Kids who come from a single parent family are orders of magnitude more likely to become criminals when they're older. They're far more likely to have substance abuse issues, they're far more likely to end up in jail, far more likely to drop out of school early, and they're far more likely just to fail at life. If you look at kids with two parents at home, again, regardless of race, including black kids, they're far more likely to go to university, they're far less likely to be criminals, they're far less likely to have substance abuse issues, etc. So why would black people be more likely to fall into this bad group? Well, black people are more likely to come from single parent families. Black people are more likely to also drop out of school earlier, which is another indicator of failing in life. And again, that's true of any race. So the narrative is slightly wrong. It's looking at a correlation and saying there's the causation. The causation is racism. No. The causation is single parent families and dropping out of school early. That's the correlation. That correlation cuts across race. That demonstrates that there is very little racism against blacks in US society. But this is such a point of confusion, and it's almost never discussed. It's implied constantly. Oh, black people are incarcerated at a vast, I think something like 50% of prisoners in the US are black. 14% of the population is black. It's constantly implied that black people are in prison for unjust reasons because society is racist. But the evidence doesn't show that. The evidence shows that black people, there's an extra step in the middle. Black people are more likely to come from a single parent family. People from a single parent family are more likely to be incarcerated. There's just a deep confusion on the left between causation and correlation. What is causing what? Now, if we look at this in the correct way that I've just described it, based on evidence, affirmative action helping black people because they're black, that doesn't make any sense. We should help people who come from single parent families. But better than just, say, giving them free tuition at university, better than that is trying to fix the problem at the root. And the root problem isn't being black. Well, because in a racist society, the root problem would be being black. That would be a problem in that society. So we would have to fix the racism. This is what the left is trying to do. The left is trying to point out racism that mostly doesn't exist and trying to fix racism that mostly doesn't exist. What it should be trying to fix is the single-parent family problem and the leaving school early problem. These are the problems that are more prevalent in the black community, and these are the problems that need to be fixed. Now, why are these problems more prevalent in the black community? That's a huge question. But to solve the underachievement of blacks, that's the problem to fix. And funnily enough, as we go up society if we split society into racial groups, the second least successful group, Latinos, has a slightly lower fatherlessness rate than blacks. Whites are one level above that. Again, a slightly lower fatherlessness rate. Asians, slightly above them, slightly lower fatherlessness rate still. And then Jews above them, even lower fatherlessness rate, single-parent family rate. The correlation here is spectacular. So this has nothing to do with, or very, very little to do with racism. Sure, you can find small pockets of that. But we must not be confused about correlation and causation. This is fucking obvious if you think about it, if you look at the data. But very few people ever make this point, and they certainly don't make it like this. The underachievement of blacks is not about racism. It's about fatherlessness. That's the problem to solve. That's the problem to openly discuss. You must be able to openly discuss this. And this isn't black people's fault necessarily. It's not individuals' fault. But to solve a problem, you need to identify what the problem is. This is the problem. Helping people because they're black later in life isn't going to fix the problem. That's a band-aid at best. And actually apportioning this to racism creates a huge fantasy that the US is deeply racist and the most racist country in history. Because look at black people underachieving. It's got nothing, or virtually nothing to do with racism. But once you start blaming the wrong thing, you end up with witch hunts. You end up with, and what a lot on the far left do now, which we know is just really the left, is the dehumanizing of white men. Here's the logic. Look at blacks. They're underachieving so much because we live in such a racist society. This society is so racist because white men, let's unperson white men. They should go at the bottom of our caste system. ... white male genocide. It's an exaggeration now, but that's where this thought process leads. If you accept these facts and you get to white men should be at the bottom of society because they're so racist, they built this racist society that we live in, well, what's the next step? Well, white men are scum. That you dehumanize the group, you dehumanize the Jews like the Nazis did. You dehumanize straight white men. What do you do then? Well, you have to give affirmative action. You have to give the non-straight white men, the black women, for example, blacks generally, you have to give blacks preferential treatment. Why? Because society is so racist. Society is so racist because of the white man. What do you do with the white man? Well, you put him at the bottom of the list of acceptable candidates for this job. What do you teach the white boys at school? Well, they must chant every morning. They must say, I am born impure. I come from a disgusting race, a disgusting group, white males. We're responsible for all the bad things in the world. This is where this road leads. It leads to white genocide. If you follow that far enough, is it going to get there? Probably not. I don't know. But this road, we're traveling very fast down this road. So if we unravel this, let's go back to the root. The root of the problem is fatherlessness. It's not racism. Fatherlessness to any race leads to failure of the children. Two parents doesn't. It's not race. We need to fix the perception of the correlation between race and success. And we need to take into account the fatherlessness aspect and the staying in school aspect. It's very easy to assume that because one race is less successful, it's therefore racism that is the reason for that. But actually that's not the case at all in the West in 2019. Something else is causing it. We need to be a bit more nuanced. We need to ram this point home. This point is never made clear to people that we've intuitively mixed up the causation and the correlation here.
This was the Deviant Developer Podcast. Tap subscribe in any podcast app to never miss an episode. To contact me or make a welcome donation, go to thedeviantdeveloper.com.